𝐤𝐄𝐅, Sword of the Spirit, narrated and interpreted by Wendy. 1st Shemu'al, 1 Samuel. Chapter 1. Now there was a certain man of Ramatim Zupim, of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Yeraham, the son of Elihuah, the son of Tahun, the son of Zuab, and Abrati. Furthermore, he had 2 wives. The name of one was 𝐉𝐄𝐄, and the name of the other Penina. And Penina had children. However, 𝐉𝐄𝐄 had no children. Moreover, this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and sacrifice unto Yahweh of hosts in Shiloh. And there the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were the priests of Yahweh. And when it was time that Elkanah offered, he gave portions to Penina his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. However, to 𝐉𝐄𝐄 he gave an extreme portion, for he loved 𝐉𝐄𝐄, but Yahweh had shut her womb. Thus they did this year by year. When she went up to the house of Yahweh, she provoked her. Therefore she wept and would not eat. Then Elkanah, her husband, asked her, 𝐉𝐄𝐄, why do you weep, and why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? Am I not better than 10 sons? Then, after they had eaten and drank in Shiloh, 𝐉𝐄𝐄 rose up. Now Eli the priest was sitting upon a seat by a post of the temple of Yahweh, and she had bitterness within her soul, and prayed unto Yahweh, and wept a lot. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Yahweh of hosts, if you will truly look upon the affliction of your handmaid, and remember me, and not forget your handmaid, but will give to your handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto you all the days of his life, and no razor will come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before Yahweh, that Eli watched her mouth. Now 𝐉𝐄𝐄, she spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, so her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. And Eli said to her, How long will you be drunk? Put away the wine from you. Then 𝐉𝐄𝐄 answered and said, No, my lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have not drunk wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before Yahweh. Do not consider your handmaid a daughter of worthlessness. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken here. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and may the Elohim of Yisrael grant the petition that you have asked from him. And she said, Let your handmaid find grace in your sight. So the woman went her way and ate, and she was no longer before him. Furthermore, they rose up early in the morning and worshipped before Yahweh. Then they returned and came to their house in Ramah. Also Elkanah knew 𝐉𝐄𝐄 his wife, and Yahweh remembered her. And it came to pass during the delivery time of her conception that 𝐉𝐄𝐄 gave birth to a son, and she called his name Shemu'al, because she asked for him from Yahweh. Then the man Elkanah and his entire house went up to offer unto Yahweh the yearly sacrifice and his vow. However, 𝐉𝐄𝐄 did not go up, for she said to her husband, I will not go up until the child is weaned, and then I will bring him, so that he may appear before Yahweh, and abide there forever. Therefore Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Wait until you have weaned him. Only Yahweh establish his word. So the woman abode, and she nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she weaned him, she took him up with her, with 3 bullocks and 1 ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine. Then she brought him to the house of Yahweh in Shiloh. Also the child was young. Then they slew the bullock, and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my lord, as your soul lives, my lord, I am the woman who stood by you here, praying unto Yahweh. I prayed for this child, and Yahweh has given me the petition that I asked from him. Also I have lent him to Yahweh, As long as he lives, he will be lent to 𝐉𝐄. And there they worshipped 𝐉𝐄. Chapter 2. And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoices in 𝐉𝐄. My horn is exalted in 𝐉𝐄. My mouth is enlarged because of my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none as Kodesh as you, for there is no one beside you, nor is there any rock like our Elohim. There is no more overly proud remarks, nor does arrogance come out of the mouth. For 𝐉𝐄 is an all of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and those who stumble are strongly bound. Those who are full of bread have hired themselves out. Therefore hunger ends. Even the barren has carried 7, and her many children has made her feeble. 𝐉𝐄 is from death and from life. From bringing down to hell, he resurrects. 𝐉𝐄 is from poverty and from profit, from tearing down, also from elevating. He raises up the poor out of the dust, lifting up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among volunteers, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth belong to 𝐉𝐄, and he has set the world upon them. He will keep the feet of his saints, but the wicked will be silent in darkness. For by strength no man prevails. The adversaries of 𝐉𝐄 will be broken to pieces. Out of the heavens he will thunder upon them. 𝐉𝐄 will judge the ends of the earth. Also he will give strength to his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. Furthermore, Elkanah went to Ramah, to his house. And the child did minister unto 𝐉𝐄 before Ali the priest. And it was a custom of the priest for the people, when any man offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a flesh hook that had 3 teeth in his hand while the flesh was boiling, and he would strike it into the pan, or kettle, or cauldron, or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So too they did to all Yisrael who came there to Shiloh. Also, before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came, and said to the man who sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have from your boiled flesh, but raw. And if he is asked, Does the man burn the offering like in the days of oil, and takes as much as his soul desires? Then he would answer him, No, but you will give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Therefore the sin of the young men was very great before 𝐉𝐄, for men resented the offering of 𝐉𝐄. However, Shemu'al ministered before 𝐉𝐄, being a child bound with a linen ephod. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Ali blessed Elkanah and his wife, and he said, 𝐉𝐄 give the seed of this woman for a loan, which is lent unto 𝐉𝐄. And they went on their way. Furthermore, 𝐉𝐄 visited Hannah, so that she conceived, and she bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. But the child Shemu'al grew before 𝐉𝐄. Now Ali was very old, but he heard everything that his sons did to all Yisrael, and how they laid with women who assembled at the door of the appointed tabernacle. So he asked them, Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all these people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear, making the people transgress 𝐉𝐄. If one man has sin against another, the judge will judge him. But if a man has sin against 𝐉𝐄, who will entreat for him? Nevertheless, they did not hearken to the voice of their father, causing 𝐉𝐄 a desire to kill them. And the child Shemu'al grew on, and was in favor with both 𝐉𝐄 and with men also. Furthermore, a man of Elohim came there to Ali, and he said to him, Thus saith 𝐉𝐄, Did I plainly appear to the house of your father when they were in Mitzrayim, in the house of Paro, and did I choose him out of all the tribes of Yisrael to be my priest, to offer upon my altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me. Also did I give to the house of your father all the offerings made by fire from the children of Yisrael. Why do you kick at my sacrifice and at my offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honor your sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the best of all the offerings of Yisrael, my people? Therefore Yahweh Elohim of Yisrael declared, Indeed, I said that your house and the house of your father will walk before me forever. But now, Yahweh says, may that be far from me. For those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me will be cursed. Behold, the days will come that I will cut off your arm and the arm of your father's house, that there will not be an old man in your house. And you will see an enemy occupation in all that was given to Yisrael, and there will not be an old man in your house for all the days. Also, to destroy your eyes and to grieve your soul, your men who I do not cut off from my altar, and all the increase of your house, they will die. And this will be a sign for you, which will come upon your 2 sons, upon Hophni and Phinehas. In one day both of them will die. And I will raise up myself a faithful priest, who will do according to that which is in my heart and in my mind. And I will build him a secure house, and he will walk before my anointed all the days. And it will come to pass that everyone who is left in your house will come bowing down to him for a piece of silver and a morsel of bread, and say, I pray you, put me into one of the priest's office, so that I may eat of bread. Chapter 3. And the child Shemu'al ministered to Yahweh before Ali, and the word of Yahweh was precious in those days. Visions were not common. And it came to pass at that time, when Ali had laid down in his place, and his eyes began to grow dim, so that he could not see, and before the lamp of Elohim went out in the temple of Yahweh, where the ark of Elohim was. And Shemu'al laid down, that Yahweh called, Shemu'al. And he answered, Here I am. So he ran to Ali and said, Here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call. Lie down again. Therefore he went and lay down. Then Yahweh called him yet again, Shemu'al. So Shemu'al arose and went to Ali and said, Here I am, for you called me. However, he answered, I did not call my son. Lie down again. Now Shemu'al still did not know Yahweh, nor was the word of Yahweh revealed to him yet. And Yahweh called Shemu'al again, a 3rd time. So he arose and went to Ali, and said, Here I am, for you called me. Then Ali understood that Yahweh had called the child. Therefore Ali said to Shemu'al, Go lie down, and it will be, if he calls you, that you will say, Speak, Adonai, for your servant hears. So Shemu'al went and laid down in his place. And Yahweh came, and stood, and called like the other times, Shemu'al, Shemu'al. Then Shemu'al answered, Speak, for your servant hears. Therefore Yahweh said to Shemu'al, Behold, I will do a thing in Yisrael, by which both of the ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. In that day I will perform against Ali all things that I have spoken concerning his house, the beginning and end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever because of the iniquity that he knows about. For his sons made themselves vile, however, he did not restrain them. Therefore I have sworn to the house of Ali that the iniquity of Ali's house will not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. Moreover, Shemu'al laid until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of Yahweh. Also, Shemu'al was afraid to show Ali the vision. However, Ali called Shemu'al and said, Shemu'al, my son. So he answered him, Here I am. And he asked, What is the thing that was said to you? I pray you, do not hide it from me. May Elohim do to you and more also, if you hide anything from me of all the things that he said to you. Therefore Shemu'al told him all the words, and hid nothing from him. And he said, Yahweh will do what he sees is good. Furthermore, Shemu'al grew, and Yahweh was with him, and he did not let any of his words fall to the ground. And all Yisrael, from Dan even to Be'er-sheba, knew that Shemu'al was set to become a prophet of Yahweh. Therefore, he who exists was seen in Shiloh again, for Yahweh revealed himself to Shemu'al in Shiloh by the word of Yahweh. Chapter 4. And the word of Shemu'al came to all Yisrael. Now Yisrael went out against the Pelishtim to battle, and pitched beside Ben-Hazer, and the Pelishtim pitched in Apek. Also the Pelishtim put themselves in array against Yisrael, and when they joined the battle, Yisrael was beaten before the Pelishtim, and they slew about 4,000 men from the army in the field. Therefore, when the people came into the camp, the elders of Yisrael said, Why has Yahweh beaten us today before the Pelishtim? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of Yahweh out of Shiloh for us. When it comes among us, then it will save us out of the hand of our enemies. Therefore the people sent to Shiloh, so that they might bring the ark of the covenant of Yahweh of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim, from there. Also the 2 sons of Ali, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of Elohim. Then when the ark of the covenant of Yahweh came into the camp, all Yisrael shouted with a great shout, and shook the earth. When the Pelishtim heard the noise of the shout, they asked, What is this noise of the great shout in the camp of the Ibrim? Then they understood that the ark of Yahweh had come into the camp. Therefore the Pelishtim were afraid, for they said, Elohim has come into the camp. And they said, Woe to us, for this has never happened before. Woe to us! Who will deliver us out of the hand of the Elohim of the gods? This is the Elohim who struck the Mitzrayim with all the plagues in the wilderness. Be strong and behave yourselves like men, O Pelishtim, or else you will become the servants of the Ibrim, like they have been to you. Behave like men and fight. Therefore the Pelishtim fought, and Yisrael was beaten. So they fled each man to his tent, and there was a very great slaughter, for 30,000 footmen of Yisrael fell there. Furthermore, the ark of Elohim was taken. Also the 2 sons of Ali, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. Moreover, a man of Benjamin ran out of the army, and came to Shiloh that same day, with torn clothes and a dama upon his head. And when he came, behold, Ali was sitting upon a seat by the wayside, watching, because his heart trembled for the ark of Elohim. And when the man came into the city and told it, the entire city cried out. And when Ali heard the noise of the crying, he asked, What is the noise of this uproar? Then the man quickly came in and told Ali. Now Ali was 98 years old, and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see. And the man said to Ali, I am he who came out of the army. I fled from the army today. So he asked, What happened to you, my son? Therefore the messenger answered and said, Yisrael has fled from before the Pelishtim. Also there has been a great slaughter among the people, and your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead also, and the ark was taken. And it came to pass when he made mention of the ark of Elohim, that he fell backward from off the seat by the side of the gate, and broke his neck. Thus he died, for he was an old and heavy man, and he had judged Yisrael for 40 years. Furthermore, his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was with child to be delivered. And when she heard the tidings that the ark of Elohim was taken, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and travailed, for her pains came upon her. And around the time of her death, the women who stood by her said to her, Fear not, for you bore a son. But she did not answer, nor did she regard it. And she named the child 𝐉𝐄𝐄, saying, The glory is departing from Yashareal, because the ark of Elohim was taken, and not because of her father-in-law or husband. Thus she said, The glory is departing from Yashareal, because the ark of Elohim was taken. Chapter 5. And the Philistine took the ark of Elohim. Then they brought it from 𝐻aben-Hazer to Ashdod. When the Philistine took the ark of Elohim, they brought it into the house of Dagon, and set it by Dagon. And when those of Ashdod rose up early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen upon his face to the earth before the ark of Yahweh. So they took Dagon and set him in his place again. And when they rose up early on the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen upon his face to the ground before the ark of Yahweh. Also the head of Dagon and both palms of his hands were cut off. However, the body of Dagon remained upon the threshold. Therefore neither the priests of Dagon, nor any who come into the house of Dagon, step on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. Therefore the hand of Yahweh was heavy upon those in Ashdod, and he destroyed them, and struck them with hemorrhoids, Ashdod and its borders. And when the men of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, The ark of Elohim of Yashareal will not stay with us, for his hand is sore upon us, and upon Dagon, our deity. Therefore they sent and gathered all the lords of the Philistine to themselves, and asked, What should we do with the ark of Elohim of Yashareal? And they answered, Let the ark of Elohim of Yashareal be carried around to God. Thus they carried around the ark of the Elohim of Yashareal. And it came to pass that after they had carried it around, the hand of Yahweh was against the city with a very great destruction. And he struck the men of the city, both small and great, and they had hemorrhoids in their private parts. Then they sent the ark of Elohim to Ekron. And it came to pass, as the ark of Elohim came to Ekron, that the Ekroni cried out, saying, They have carried around the ark of the Elohim of Yashareal to us, to slay us and our people. Therefore they sent and gathered all the lords of the Philistine together, and said, Send the ark of the Elohim of Yashareal away, and let it go to its own place again, so that it will not slay us and our people. For there was a deadly destruction throughout the entire city. The hand of Elohim was very heavy there. The men who did not die were smitten with hemorrhoids. Therefore the cry of the city went up to the heavens. Chapter 6. And the ark of Yahweh was in the country of the Philistine for 7 months. So the Philistine called for the priests and the enchanters, saying, What should we do to the ark of Yahweh? Tell us how we will send him back to his place. So they said, If you send away the ark of the Elohim of Yashareal, do not send him away empty. But surely you will return him with a shame offering. Then you will be healed, and you will know why his hand was not removed from you. Then they asked, What will be the shame offering, so that we can return him? They answered, 5 golden hemorrhoids, and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistine, for the same plague was on all of you and your lords. Therefore you will make images of your hemorrhoids, and images of the mice that destroyed your land, and you will give glory to the Elohim of Yashareal. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from off you, and from off your deities, and from off your land. Why then do you harden your hearts, like the Mitzrayim and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? When he had worked wonderfully among them, did they not let the people go, and they departed? Now therefore make a new cart, and take 2 milk cows, that were never trained on a yoke and hitch, and tie the cows to the cart, and take their calves from behind them to the house. Then take the ark of Yahweh, and lay it upon the cart. Also put the jewels of gold, which you return to him for a shame offering, in a coffer by the side of it, and send it away, that it may go. Then watch. If it goes up by the way of its own border towards Beit Shemesh, he has done this great evil to us. But if not, Then we will know that it was not his hand that struck us. It was by chance that this happened to us. Therefore the men did so. And they took 2 milk cows and tied them to a cart, and shut up their calves at home. Also they laid the ark of 𝐉𝐄 upon the cart, and the coffer with the golden mice and the images of their hemorrhoids. And the cows took the path to the way of Beit Shemesh, united along the highway, grazing as they went. And they did not turn aside, to the right hand or to the left. So the lords of the Philistine followed behind them to the border of Beit Shemesh. And Beit Shemesh was reaping the wheat harvest in the valley. Then they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark. Moreover, they rejoiced to see it. Furthermore, the ark came into the field of Yehoshua, a Beit Shemeshi, and a great stone stood there. Moreover, they split the wood of the cart, and offered the cows for an ascension offering unto 𝐉𝐄. Then the Levim took down the ark of 𝐉𝐄, and the coffer that was with it, in which the jewels of gold were, and put them on the great stone. Then, that same day, the men of Beit Shemesh offered ascension offerings and sacrificed sacrifices unto 𝐉𝐄. And when the 5 lords of the Philistine saw it, they returned to Akrun that same day. And these are the golden hemorrhoids that the Philistine returned as a shame offering unto 𝐉𝐄. For Ashdod, 1. For Azzah, 1. For Ashkelon, 1. For Gat, 1. For Akrun, 1. Also the golden mice were numbered for all the cities of the Philistine that belonged to the 5 lords, of fenced cities and of country villages, even to the great stone on which they set the ark of the covenant down that day, in the field of Yehoshua, the Beit Shemeshi. However, he struck the men of Beit Shemesh, because they had looked into the ark of 𝐉𝐄. Therefore he struck 57,000 men among the people. And the people lamented, because 𝐉𝐄 had smitten many of the people with a great slaughter. Therefore the men of Beit Shemesh asked, Who is able to stand before 𝐉𝐄, this holy Elohim? And to whom will he go up from us? So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath-Yearim, saying, The Philistine have brought the ark of 𝐉𝐄 again. Come down, take it to yourselves. Chapter 7. And the men of Kiriath-Yearim came and fetched the ark of 𝐉𝐄. Then they brought it into the house of Abinadab in the hill, and Eleazar his son was sanctified to keep the ark of 𝐉𝐄. And it happened that the ark abode in Kiriath-Yearim a long time, for it was 20 years. And the entire house of Yeshareal lamented after 𝐉𝐄. Therefore Shemu'al spoke to the entire house of Yeshareal, saying, If you return to 𝐉𝐄 with all your hearts, put away the foreign deities and Ashtaroth from among you, and prepare your hearts for 𝐉𝐄, and serve him only, then he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistine. So the children of Yeshareal put away the Baalim and the Ashtaroth, and served 𝐉𝐄 only. Then Shemu'al said, Gather all Yeshareal to Mitzpah, and I will pray for you unto 𝐉𝐄. Therefore they gathered together at Mitzpah, and drew water, and poured it out before 𝐉𝐄, and fasted on that day, and said there, We have sinned against 𝐉𝐄. Then Shemu'al judged the children of Yeshareal in Mitzpah. And when the Philistine heard that the children of Yeshareal were gathered together at Mitzpah, the lords of the Philistine went up against Yeshareal. And when the children of Yeshareal heard it, they were afraid of the Philistine. Therefore the children of Yeshareal said to Shemu'al, Do not stop crying unto 𝐉𝐄 our Elohim for us, so that he will save us out of the hand of the Philistine. Then Shemu'al took a whole nursing lamb, and offered it for an ascension offering unto 𝐉𝐄. And Shemu'al cried unto 𝐉𝐄 for Yeshareal, and 𝐉𝐄 heard him. And as Shemu'al was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistine drew near to battle against Yeshareal. But 𝐉𝐄 thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistine. And he confused them, and they were struck down before Yeshariel. Moreover, the men of Yeshariel went out of Mitzpah and pursued the Pelishtim and attacked them until Beit Gar. Then Shemu'al took a stone and set it between Mitzpah and Shen, and called the name of it 𝐉𝑒n-Hazer, saying, "Up to here Yahweh helped us." Thus the Pelishtim were subdued, and they did not come into the border of Yeshariel. And the hand of Yahweh was against the Pelishtim all the days of Shemu'al, and the cities that the Pelishtim had taken from Yeshariel were restored to Yeshariel, from Akrun even to Gat. And Yeshariel delivered its borders out of the hands of the Pelishtim. Also, there was peace between Yeshariel and the Amori. Furthermore, Shemu'al judged Yeshariel all the days of his life. And from year to year he went in a tour to Beit-El and Gilgal and Mitzpah, and judged Yeshariel in all those places. Then he returned to Ramah, because his house was there, and there he judged Yeshariel, and there he built an altar unto Yahweh. Chapter 8. And it came to pass, when Shemu'al was old, that he made his sons judges over Yeshariel. Now the name of his firstborn was Yual, and the name of his second, Abiyah, judges in Be'er-sheba. However, his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after money, and took bribes, and perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Yeshariel gathered themselves together, and came to Shemu'al in Ramah, and said to him, "Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge over us like all nations." However, when they said, "Give us a king to judge us," it displeased Shemu'al. So Shemu'al prayed unto Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Shemu'al, "Hearken to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, like all the deeds that they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Mitzrayim, even to this day. Just as they have forsaken me and served other deities, this they do to you also. Now therefore hearken to their voice. However, for a protest, inform them and show them the type of king who will reign over them." Furthermore, Shemu'al told all the words of Yahweh to the people, who asked him for a king. And he said, "This will be the type of king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. Moreover, he will appoint for himself captains over thousands, and captains over 50s, to plow his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and to equip his chariots. Also, he will take your daughters to be mixers, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. Next, he will take the best of your fields, and of your vineyards, and of your olive yards, and give them to his servants. Moreover, he will take 1/10 of your seed, and of your vineyards, and give it to his officers and his servants. Then he will take your men servants, and your maidservants, and your finest young men, and your asses, and put them for his work. He will take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. Furthermore, during that day, you will cry out because of the king who you have chosen for yourself. However, during that day, Yahweh will not hear you." Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Shemu'al, and they said, "Surely not. If we have a king over us, it will be like this. When our king judges us, and goes out before us, and fights our battles, we too will be like all the nations." Moreover, Shemu'al heard all the words of the people, and repeated them in the ears of Yahweh. Therefore Yahweh said to Shemu'al, "Hearken to their voice, and make them a king." So Shemu'al said to the men of Yeshariel, "Go, every man to his city." Chapter 9. Now there was a man of Benjamin, whose name was Kish, a son of Abiel, the son of Zeur, the son of Bechorat, the son of Abiach, a Benjamini, a mighty man of power. And he had a son whose name was Shaul, a choice young man, and fine. Moreover, there was not a more handsome person than him among the children of Yeshariel. From his shoulders and up, he was higher than any other person. Furthermore, the asses of Kish, Shaul's father, were lost. And Kish said to Shaul his son, Now arise, go seek the asses. Also, take from the servants with you. Therefore he passed through Mount Ephraim, and passed through the land of Shalisha. But they did not find them. Then they passed through the land of Sha'alim. Still nothing. So he passed through the land of Binyamin, but they did not find them. Then, when they came to the land of Zup, Shaul said to the servant who was with them, Come, let us return, or else my father will stop caring about the asses and have concern for us. Therefore he said to him, Behold now, a man of Elohim is in this city, and the man is honorable. All that he says surely comes to pass. Now let us go there. Perhaps he will show us the way that we should go. Then Shaul said to his servant, But look, if we go, what will we bring the man? For the bread in our vessels is gone. Also, there is not a present to bring the man of Elohim. What do we have? So the servant answered Shaul again, and said, Behold, I have a fourth part of a shekel of silver here at hand. I will give this to the man of Elohim, to tell us our way. Previously, in Yeshariel, when a man went to inquire of Elohim, he said this, Come, let us go to the Ra. Because he who is called a prophet now was once called a Ra. Then Shaul said to his servant, Well said, come, let us go. So they went to the city where the man of Elohim was. And as they went up the hill of the city, they found young maidens going out to draw water, and asked them, Is the Ra here? Therefore they answered him and said, He is. Behold, he is ahead of you. Now hurry, for he came today to the city. For today a sacrifice of the people is in the high place. As you go into the city, you must find him right away, before he goes up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat until he comes, because he does the sacrifice endowment. Afterwards, those invited will eat. Now therefore, get yourself up, for you will find him about this time. So they went up into the city. When they had come into the city, behold, Shemu'al came out towards them, for to go up into the high place. Now the previous day Yehud told Shemu'al in his ear about Shaul coming, saying, Tomorrow about this time I will send you a man out from the land of Binyamin, and you will anoint him to be captain over my people, Yeshariel, so that he may save my people out of the hand of the Palestine. For I have looked upon my people, because their cry has come to me. Furthermore, when Shemu'al saw Shaul, Yehud said to him, Behold, the man whom I spoke to you. The same one will reign over my people. Then Shaul drew near to Shemu'al in the gate and said, Tell me, I pray you, where is the house of the Ra? Therefore Shemu'al answered Shaul and said, I am the Ra. Go up before me to the high place, for you will eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let you go, and I will tell you all that is in your heart. And as for your asses, which were lost 3 days ago, do not set your mind upon them, for they have been found. However, unto whom is the desire of all Yeshariel? Is it not you, and the entire house of your father? Therefore Shaul answered and said, Am I not a Binyamini, the smallest of the tribes of Yeshariel? And my family is the least of all the families of the tribe of Binyamin. Why then do you speak to me like this? But Shemu'al took Shaul and his servant and brought them into the parlor, and made them sit in the best place among those who were invited, which were about 30 people. Then Shemu'al said to the cook, Bring the portion that I gave you, of which I said, set it by itself. Therefore the cook took up the shoulder, also that which was upon it, and set it before Shemu'al. Then he said, Do you see what was reserved, which is placed before you? Eat it, because it has been reserved for you for this time, ever since I said, I will invite the people. Therefore Shemu'al ate with Shemu'al that day. Moreover, when they had come down from the high place into the city, he communed with Shemu'al on top of the house. Then they arose early, and it came to pass about the dawning of the day that Shemu'al called Shemu'al to the top of the house, saying, Get up, so that I may send you away. Therefore Shemu'al arose, and they went out abroad, both of them, he and Shemu'al. And as they were going down to the end of the city, Shemu'al said to Shemu'al, Tell the servant to pass on before us, but you stand still for a while, so that I may show you the word of Elohim. Chapter 10. Then Shemu'al took a vial of oil, and poured it upon his head, and kissed him, and said, Is this not because 𝐉𝐄 has anointed you to be captain over his inheritance? When you have departed from me today, then you will find 2 men by Rachel's sepulchre, on the border of Benjamin and Zilzach. And they will say to you, The asses that you went to seek have been found. But look, your father has left tending the asses, and mourns for you, saying, What will I do for my son? Then you will go forward from there, and you will come to the plain of Tabor, and there you will meet 3 men going up to Elohim toward Beit Al. One is carrying 3 kids, and another is carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another is carrying a bottle of wine. Furthermore, they will salute you and give you 2 of the bread, which you will receive by their hand. After that you will come to the hill of Elohim, where the garrison of the Philistine is located. And it will come to pass, when you have come there to the city, that you will meet a company of prophets coming down from the high place with a psaltery and a tabret and a pipe and a harp before them, and they will prophesy. Then the Ruach of 𝐉𝐄 will come upon you, and you will prophesy with them, and will be turned into another man. And let it be, when these signs come to you, do what is found in your hand, for Elohim is with you. Then you will go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down to you, to offer ascension offerings, to sacrifice sacrifices of restoration. You will tarry for 7 days until I come to you and show you what to do. And it happened that when he turned his back to leave Shemu'al, Elohim gave him another heart, and all those signs came to pass that day. Furthermore, when they came to the hill, behold, a company of prophets met him, and the Ruach of Elohim came upon him, and he prophesied among them. And it came to pass, when all who knew him previously saw that he prophesied among the prophets, then the people said one to another, What is this that has come to the son of Kish? Is Shaul also among the prophets? Then someone from the same place answered and said, But who is their father? Therefore it became a proverb, Is Shaul also among the prophets? And when he had made an end of prophesying, he came to the high place. Furthermore, Shaul's uncle asked him and his servant, Where did you go? Therefore he answered, To seek the asses. However, when we saw that they were nowhere, we went to Shemu'al. Then Shaul's uncle asked, Tell me, I pray you, what did Shemu'al say to you? So Shaul answered his uncle, He clearly told us that the asses were found. However, concerning the matter about the kingdom, of which Shemu'al spoke, he did not tell him. Furthermore, Shemu'al called the people together unto 𝐉𝐄 to Mitzpah. And he said to the children of Yeshariel, Thus saith 𝐉𝐄, Elohim of Yeshariel, I brought up Yeshariel out of Mitzrayim, and delivered you out of the hand of Mitzrayim, and out of the hand of all kingdoms, of those who oppressed you. Yet today you have rejected your Elohim, who has delivered you from your adversaries and your tribulations himself. Also you have said to him this, Set a king over us. Now therefore, present yourselves before 𝐉𝐄𐄅 by your tribes and by your thousands. And when Shemu'al had caused the tribes of Yeshariel to come near, the tribe of Benjamin was taken. When he had caused the tribe of Benjamin to come near by their families, the family of Machri was taken. Furthermore, Shaul, the son of Kish, was taken. However, when they looked for him, he could not be found. Therefore they inquired of 𝐉𝐄𝐅 further, whether the man had come there yet. And 𝐉𝐄𝐅 answered, Behold, he has hidden himself among the cargo. So they ran and fetched him from there. And when he stood among the people, he was higher than all the people from his shoulders up. And Shemu'al said to all the people, See him whom 𝐉𝐄𝐅 has chosen, that there is none like him among all the people. Therefore all the people shouted and said, Elohim save the king. Moreover, Shemu'al told the people the type of kingdom and wrote it in a separ, and laid it up before 𝐉𝐄𝐅. And Shemu'al sent all the people away, every man to his house. Also Shaul went home to Gibeat, and the band of men went there with him, whose hearts Elohim had touched. However, the children of worthlessness questioned, How will this man save us? And they despised him, and did not bring him presents, but he held his peace. Chapter 11. And Nahash the Ammoni came up and encamped against Yabesh Gilead. Then all the men of Nabesh said to Nahash, Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you. So Nahash the Ammoni answered them, I will make a covenant with you on this condition, that I may pluck out all of your right eyes, and lay this disgrace upon all Yeshariel. So the elders of Yabesh said to him, Give us 7 days, so that we may send messengers to all the borders of Yeshariel, and then, if there is no man to save us, we will come out to you. Furthermore, the messengers came to the hill of Shaul, and the tidings were told in the ears of the people, and all the people lifted up their voices and wept. And behold, Shaul came following the herd out of the field. And Shaul said, What has happened to this people, for they weep? Therefore they told him the tidings of the men of Yabesh. Then, when he heard these tidings, the Ruach of Elohim came upon Shaul, and his anger was kindled greatly. Moreover, he took a yoke of oxen, and cut them into pieces, and sent them throughout the borders of Yeshariel by the hands of messengers, saying, Whoever does not come follow Shaul and Shemu'al, this will be done to his oxen. And the fear of 𝐉𝐄𝐅 fell on the people. So they came out as a unified man. And when he numbered them in Bezek, the children of Yeshariel were 300,000, and the men of Yehuda were 30,000. And they said to the messengers who came, You will tell this to the men of Yabesh Gilead. Tomorrow, when the sun is hot, you will have help. Therefore the messengers came and showed it to the men of Yabesh, and they were glad. Then the men of Yabesh said, Tomorrow we will come out to you, and you will do to us all that seems good to you. And it came to pass on the next day that Shaul put the people into 3 companies. And he came into the middle of the encampment during the morning march, and slew Ammon until the heat of the day. And those who remained were scattered, such that 2 of them were not left together. Then the people said to Shemu'al, Who is he who said, Why will Shaul reign over us? Bring those men, that they may be put to death. However, Shaul said, No one will be put to death today, for today 𝐉𝐄𝐅 has worked salvation in Yeshariel. Then Shemu'al said to the people, Come, and let us go to Gilgal, and restore the kingdom there. Therefore all the people went to Gilgal, and there, in Gilgal, they made Shaul king before 𝐉𝐄𝐅, and there they offered sacrifices of restoration before 𝐉𝐄𝐅. Also there, Shaul and all the men of Yeshariel rejoiced greatly. Chapter 12. And Shemu'al said to all Yeshariel, Behold, I have hearkened to your voice in all that you have said to me, and have made a king over you. And now, behold, the king walks before you, and I am old and gray-headed, and behold, my sons are with you, and I have walked before you from my childhood to this day. Behold, I am here. Witness against me before 𝐉𝐄 and before his Mashiach. Whose ox have I taken? Or whose ass have I taken? Or who have I defrauded? Who have I oppressed? Or of whose hand have I taken a bribe to blind my eyes? And I will restore it to you. Then they said, You have not defrauded us, nor oppressed us, nor have you taken anything from any man's hand. Then he said to them, 𝐉𝐄 is a witness for you. Also, his Mashiach is a witness today, that you have not found anything in my hand. And they answered, Witness. Then Shemu'al said to the people, It was 𝐉𝐄 who advanced Moshe and Aharon, and brought your fathers up out from the land of Mitzrayim. Now therefore, stand still, that I may reason with you before 𝐉𝐄 of all the righteous acts of 𝐉𝐄, which he did for you and your fathers. When Jacob came into Mitzrayim, and your fathers cried unto 𝐉𝐄, then 𝐉𝐄 sent Moshe and Aharon, who brought your fathers out of Mitzrayim, and made them dwell in this place. However, when they forgot 𝐉𝐄 their Elohim, he sold them into the hand of Sisera, captain of the army of Chetzor, and into the hand of the Pelishtim, and into the hand of the king of Moab, and they fought against them. Therefore they cried unto 𝐉𝐄 and said, We have sinned because we have forsaken 𝐉𝐄, and have served the Baalim and the Ashtarut. But now deliver us out of the hand of our enemies, and we will serve you. Also 𝐉𝐄 sent Yerub-Baal, and Bedan, and Yepetach, and Shemu'al, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies on every side, and you dwelled safe. And when you saw that Nachash, the king of the children of Ammon, came against you, you said to me, No, but a king will reign over us, when 𝐉𝐄 your Elohim was your king. Now therefore, behold, the king whom you have chosen, whom you have desired, and behold, 𝐉𝐄 has set a king over you. If you will fear 𝐉𝐄 and serve him, and obey his voice, and not rebel against the commandments of 𝐉𝐄, both you and the king who reigns over you also will continue to follow 𝐉𝐄 your Elohim. However, if you will not obey the voice of 𝐉𝐄, but rebel against the commandment of 𝐉𝐄, then the hand of 𝐉𝐄 will be against you, like it was against your fathers. Now therefore stand and see this great thing that 𝐉𝐄 will do before your eyes. Is today not the wheat harvest? I will call unto 𝐉𝐄, and he will send thunder and rain, so that you may understand and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of 𝐉𝐄, in asking a king for yourself. Then Shemu'al called unto 𝐉𝐄, and 𝐉𝐄 sent thunder and rain that day. And all the people greatly feared 𝐉𝐄 and Shemu'al. And all the people said to Shemu'al, Pray for your servants unto 𝐉𝐄 your Elohim, so that we do not die. For we have added this evil to all our sins, to ask for a king. Therefore Shemu'al said to the people, Fear not, you have done all this wickedness. However, do not turn aside from following 𝐉𝐄, and serve 𝐉𝐄 with all your heart. And do not turn yourself aside to follow vain things that cannot profit nor deliver. For 𝐉𝐄 will not forsake his people, for his great name's sake, because it pleases 𝐉𝐄 to make you his people. Moreover, as for me, Elohim forbid that I should sin against 𝐉𝐄 in ceasing to pray for you, and I will teach you the good and the right way. Only fear 𝐉𝐄, and serve him in truth with all your heart, so that your greatness is seen. But if you will still do wickedly, you will be consumed, both you and your king. Chapter 13. Shaul reigned for 1 year. Then, when he had reigned the 2nd year over Yeshariel, Shaul chose for himself 3,000 men of Yeshariel. 2,000 were with Shaul in Michmash and in Mount Beit-al, and 1,000 were with 𝐉𝐄𝐿 in 𝐤𝐄𝐅 of Benjamin. And the rest of the people he sent each man to his tent. Furthermore, 𝐉𝐄𝐿 struck the garrison of the Pelishtim that was at Geba, and the Pelishtim heard of it. And Shaul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Abiram hear." Therefore all Yisrael heard that Shaul had beaten the garrison of the Pelishtim, and Yisrael was a stench in Pelishtim. So the people were called together to follow Shaul in Gilgal. And the Pelishtim gathered themselves together to fight with Yisrael, 30,000 chariots, and 6,000 horsemen. And the people were like the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. Moreover, they came up and pitched in Michmash, east of Beit Aun. When the men of Yisrael saw that they were in trouble, for the people were distressed, then the people hid themselves in caves, and in thickets, and in rocks, and in high places, and in pits. And some of the Abiram went over Yarden to the land of God and Gilead. As for Shaul, he was still in Gilgal. However, all the people who followed him trembled. And he tarried for 7 days, according to the set time that Shemu'al had appointed. But Shemu'al did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered before him. Therefore Shaul said, "Bring an ascension offering, and sacrifices of restoration here to me." Then he offered the ascension offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he made an end of offering the ascension offering, behold, Shemu'al came. So Shaul went out to meet him. However, Shemu'al asked, "What have you done?" And Shaul answered, "Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and you did not come within the appointed days. Also, the Pelishtim gathered themselves together in Michmash. So I said, the Pelishtim will come down now upon me in Gilgal, and I have not made supplication unto Yahweh. Therefore I was forced and offered an ascension offering." However, Shemu'al said to Shaul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of Yahweh your Elohim, that he commanded you, for Yahweh would have established your kingdom upon Yisrael forever. But now your kingdom will not continue, because you have not kept that which Yahweh commanded you. Yahweh will seek for himself a man after his own heart, and Yahweh will command him to be the captain over his people." Therefore Shemu'al arose and got himself up from Gilgal to 𝐤𝐄𝐅, to Benjamin. Furthermore, Shaul numbered the people who were present with him, about 600 men. Then Shaul and 𝐉𝐄𝐿 his son, and the people who were present with him, stayed in 𝐤𝐄𝐅 of Benjamin, and the Pelishtim encamped in Michmash. Also, plunderers came out of the camp of the Pelishtim in 3 companies. One company turned to the way of Abra, to the land of Shual, and another company turned to the way of Beit Horon, and another company turned to the way of the border that looks towards the valley of Zebaim, to the wilderness. Now there were no blacksmiths found throughout the entire land of Yisrael, because the Pelishtim said, "Lest the Abiram make swords or spears." So all Yisrael went down to the Pelishtim, to sharpen each man's spear, and coulter, and axe, and mattock. Therefore they requested the sharpening for the mattocks, and for the coulters, and for the forks, and for the axes, and for the repointing of the goads. So on the day of the battle there was not a sword or spear found in the hand of any of the people who were with Shaul and 𝐉𝐄𝐿. Only Shaul and 𝐉𝐄𝐿 his son had them. Furthermore, the garrison of the Pelishtim went out to the passage of Michmash. Chapter 14. Now it happened one day that 𝐉𝐄𝐿 the son of Shaul said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the other side of the garrison of the Pelishtim." But he did not tell his father. Therefore Shaul tarried in the othermost part of 𝐤𝐄 under the pomegranate tree that is in Migron. Also the people who were with him were about 600 men. And Achiah, the son of Ahithub, Ahikabud's brother, the son of Pinchas, the son of Ali, the priest of Yahweh in Shiloh, was wearing an ephod. However, the people did not know that Jehonatan was gone. Furthermore, the passage that Jehonatan sought to go over to the garrison of the Philistine was between a sharp rock on one side and a sharp rock on the other side. Also, the name of one was Butzeta, and the name of the other, Seneh. The forefront of one was situated northward over against Michmash, and the other was southward against Gibeot. Furthermore, Jehonatan said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that Yahweh will work for us, for there is no restraints for Yahweh to save by many or by few." So his armor-bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Should you turn, behold, I am with you according to your heart." Then Jehonatan said, "Behold, we will pass over to these men, and we will reveal ourselves to them. If they say this to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand still in our place and not go to them. However, if they say this, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for Yahweh has delivered them into our hand, and this will be a sign to us." Therefore they revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistine. And the Philistine said, "Look, the Ibarim have come out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." Then the men of the garrison responded to Jehonatan and his armor-bearer, and said, "Come to us, and we will show you something." Therefore Jehonatan said to his armor-bearer, "Come up, follow me, for Yahweh has delivered them into the hand of Yisrael." So Jehonatan climbed up upon his hands and feet, and his armor-bearer followed him. Then they fell before Jehonatan and his armor-bearer, who slew behind him. And that first slaughter which Jehonatan and his armor-bearer made was about 20 men within a half-acre of a yoked field. Then there was a trembling in the encampment, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and the spoilers, they trembled also, and the earth quaked. Moreover, it was a very great trembling. Then the watchmen of Shaul in Gibeat of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went on, beating down one another. Furthermore, Shaul said to the people who were with him, "Now number, and see who is gone from us." And when they had numbered, behold, Jehonatan and his armor-bearer were not there. Then Shaul said to Ahijah, "Bring the ark of Elohim here," for at that time the ark of Elohim was with the children of Yisrael. And it came to pass, while Shaul talked to the priest, that the noise that was in the encampment of the Philistine went on and increased. So Shaul told the priest, "Withdraw your hand." Then Shaul and all the people who were with him assembled themselves, and they came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a very great confusion. Moreover, the Ibarim who were with the Philistine before that time, who went up with them into the camp round about, they too turned to be with Yisrael, who were with Shaul and Jehonatan. Likewise, all the men of Yisrael who had hidden themselves in Mount Aparaim, they heard that the Philistine fled. They too followed hard after them during the battle. And Yahweh saved Yisrael that day, and the battle passed over to Beit Aon. However, the men of Yisrael were distressed that day, for Shaul had vowed to the people, saying, "Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, so that I may be avenged of my enemies." Therefore none of the people tasted any food. Furthermore, all the land became wooded, and there was honey upon the ground. And when the people had come into the forest, behold, the honey dropped, but no man put his hand to his mouth, because the people feared the oath. However, Jehonatan did not hear that his father charged the people with an oath. Therefore he put forth the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it into a honeycomb, and put his hand into his mouth, and his eyes were enlightened. Then one of the people responded and said, Your father clearly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed is the man who eats any food this day,' and the people are faint." Then 𝐉𝐄𝐄 said, "My father has troubled the land. Look, I pray you, how my eyes have been enlightened because I tasted a little of this honey. If the people had freely eaten what they had found today, how much more of the plunder of our enemies would there be? For then it would have been a much greater slaughter among the Pelishtim." Moreover, they struck the Pelishtim that day from Michmash to Ailun, but the people were faint. Therefore the people flew upon the plunder, and took sheep and oxen and calves, and slew them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. Then they told Shaul, saying, "Behold, the people sin against 𝐉𝐄, and that they eat with the blood." And he said, "You have transgressed. Roll a great stone to me this day." Then Shaul said, "Disperse yourselves among the people, and say to them, Bring me here every man his ox, and every man his sheep, and slay them here, and eat, and do not sin against 𝐉𝐄 by eating with the blood." Therefore each man of all the people brought his ox with him that night, and slew them there. Furthermore, Shaul built an altar unto 𝐉𝐄, like the first altar that he built unto 𝐉𝐄. And Shaul said, "Let us go down after the Pelishtim by night, and plunder them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man among them." So they said, "Do whatever seems good to you." However, the priest said, "Let us draw near to Elohim here." So Shaul asked counsel of Elohim, "Should I go down after the Pelishtim? Will you deliver them into the hand of Yeshariel?" But he did not answer him that day. And Shaul said, "Draw near here, all the chiefs among the people, and learn and see what sin has happened today. For as 𝐉𝐄 lives, who saves Yeshariel, even if it is in 𝐉𝐄 my son, he will surely die." But there was not a man among all the people who answered him. Then he said to all Yeshariel, "You on one side, and me and 𝐉𝐄 my son will be on the other side." So the people said to Shaul, "Do what seems good to you." Therefore Shaul said unto 𝐉𝐄 Elohim of Yeshariel, "Give a perfect lot." Then Shaul and 𝐉𝐄 were taken, but the people escaped. Then Shaul said, "Cast lots between me and Yonatan my son." And Yonatan was taken. Then Shaul asked Yonatan, "Tell me what you have done." So Yonatan told him and said, "I only tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, and behold, I must die." Then Shaul answered, "May Elohim do so, and more also, for you will surely die, 𝐉𝐄." However, the people said to Shaul, "Will 𝐉𝐄 die, who has worked this great salvation in Yeshariel? Elohim forbid. As 𝐉𝐄 lives, not one hair of his head will fall to the ground. For he has worked with Elohim today." Therefore the people rescued 𝐉𝐄 so that he did not die. Then Shaul halted from following the Pelishtim, and the Pelishtim went to their own place. Furthermore, Shaul took over the kingdom of Yeshariel, and he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, and against the children of Ammon, and against Adum, and against the kings of Zubah, and against the Pelishtim. Therefore, wherever he turned himself, he vexed them. And he gathered an army, and struck the Amalek, and he delivered Yeshariel out of the hands of those who plundered them. Now the sons of Shaul were 𝐉𝐄 and Yeshui, and Melchishua. Also the names of his two daughters: the name of the firstborn is Merab, and the name of the younger is Michal. And the name of Shaul's wife was Nachinaam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the captain of his army was Abiner, the son of Ner, Shaul's uncle. And Kish was the father of Shaul. And Ner, the father of Abiner, was the son of Abial. And there was a mighty war against the Pelishtim all the days of Shaul. Therefore, when Shaul saw any strong man, or any valiant man, he took him for himself. Chapter 15. Also Shemu'al said to Shaul, Yahweh sent me to anoint you to be the king over his people, over Yisrael. Now therefore hearken to the voice of the words of Yahweh. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, I remember what Amalek did to Yisrael, how he laid wait for him in the way, when he came up from Mitzrayim. Now go and strike Amalek, and completely destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. So Shaul gathered the people together, and numbered them in Telael, 200,000 footmen, and 10,000 men were from Yehudah. Then Shaul came to the city of Amalek, and laid wait in the valley. And Shaul said to the Keni, Go, depart, get yourself down from the Amalek, lest I destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the children of Yisrael when they came up from Mitzrayim. Therefore the Keni departed from among the Amalek. Then Shaul struck the Amalek from Hechwilah until you come to Shur, which is over against Mitzrayim. However, he took Agag, the king of the Amalek, alive, but completely destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. So Shaul and the people spared Agag, also the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the fatlings, and of the lambs, and of all that is good, and did not completely destroy them, but everything that was vile and refused, that they destroyed completely. Then the word of Yahweh came to Shemu'al, saying, I regret that I have established Shaul to be king, for he has turned away from following me, and has not performed my commandments. And it grieved Shemu'al, and he cried unto Yahweh all night. And when Shemu'al rose early to meet Shaul in the morning, it was told to Shemu'al, saying, Shaul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up his authority there. Now he has left and passed on, and has gone down to Gilgal. Therefore Shemu'al came to Shaul, and Shaul said to him, Blessed are you of Yahweh. I have performed the commandment of Yahweh. So Shemu'al asked, Why then is there the bleating of sheep in my ears, and the bellowing of oxen that I hear? Therefore Shaul answered, They have brought them from Amalek, for the people spared the best of the sheep and oxen, to sacrifice unto Yahweh your Elohim, and the rest we have completely destroyed. Then Shemu'al said to Shaul, Stay, and I will tell you what Yahweh told me this night. And he said to him, Pray tell. Therefore Shemu'al said, When you were little in your own sight, were you not made the head of the tribes of Yisrael, and Yahweh anointed you king over Yisrael? Then Yahweh sent you on a journey and said, Go and completely destroy the sinners of Amalek, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then did you not obey the voice of Yahweh, but flew upon the plunder, and did wickedly in the sight of Yahweh? However, Shaul said to Shemu'al, Indeed, I have obeyed the voice of Yahweh, and have gone the way which Yahweh sent me, and have brought Agag the king of Amalek, and have completely destroyed the Amalek. But the people took the plunder, sheep and oxen, the best of the things which have been completely destroyed, to sacrifice unto Yahweh your Elohim in Gilgal. Therefore Shemu'al said, Does Yahweh have as much delight in ascension offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of Yahweh? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is like iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of Yahweh, he has rejected you from being king also. Therefore Shaul said to Shemu'al, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of Yahweh and your words, because I feared the people, and I obeyed their voice. Now therefore, I pray you, pardon my sin, and return with me, that I may worship Yahweh. However, Shemu'al said to Shaul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of 𝐉𝐄, and 𝐉𝐄 has rejected you from being king of Yisrael. And as Shemu'al turned around to leave, he laid hold upon the skirt of his mantle, and it tore. Therefore Shemu'al said to him, 𝐉𝐄 has torn the kingdom of Yisrael from you today, and has given it to a neighbor of yours, who is better than you. Also, the strength of Yisrael does not lie nor repent, for he is not an Adam, that he would repent. Then he said, I have sinned. Honor me now, I pray you, before the elders of my people, and before Yisrael, and turn again to me, that I may worship 𝐉𝐄, your Elohim. Then Shemu'al turned again, following Shaul, and Shaul worshipped 𝐉𝐄. Bring Agag, the king of the Amalek, here, to me. Therefore Agag came to him delicately, and Agag said, Surely the bitterness of death has passed. However, Shemu'al said, Like your sword has made women childless, so too your mother will be childless among women. Then Shemu'al cut Agag in pieces before 𝐉𝐄 in Gilgal. Next Shemu'al went to Ramah, and Shaul went up to his house to Gibeat of Shaul. Furthermore, Shemu'al did not come to see Shaul any more until the day of his death. Nevertheless, Shemu'al mourned for Shaul, and 𝐉𝐄 regretted that he made Shaul king over Yisrael. Chapter 16. And 𝐉𝐄 said to Shemu'al, How long will you mourn for Shaul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Yisrael? Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Yesi of Beit-Lechem, for I have provided myself a king among his sons. Then Shemu'al said, How can I go? For Shaul will hear of it, and he will kill me. So 𝐉𝐄 said, Take a heifer with you, and say, I have come to sacrifice unto 𝐉𝐄. Then call Yesi to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you will do. And you will anoint for me whom I name to you. Therefore Shemu'al did what 𝐉𝐄 spoke. And he came to Beit-Lechem, and the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and asked, Have you come peacefully? And he answered, Peacefully, I have come to sacrifice unto 𝐉𝐄. Sanctify yourselves, and come with me to the sacrifice. Also he sanctified Yesi and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass, when they had come, that he looked upon Eliab, and said, Surely before 𝐉𝐄 he is his Mashiach. But 𝐉𝐄 said to Shemu'al, Do not look on his appearance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For not as Adam sees, for Adam looks on outward appearance, but 𝐉𝐄 looks on the heart. Then Yesi called Abinadab, and made him pass before Shemu'al. But he said, Nor has 𝐉𝐄 chosen this one. Then Yesi made Shammah pass by, and he said, Nor has 𝐉𝐄 chosen this one. Yesi made his 7 sons to pass before Shemu'al again. And Shemu'al said to Yesi, 𝐉𝐄 has not chosen these. Therefore Shemu'al asked Yesi, Are all your sons here? And he said, My youngest still remains, and behold, he keeps the sheep. Then Shemu'al said to Yesi, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down until he comes here. So he sent and brought him in. Now he was red-headed, and he had beautiful eyes, and he was attractive too. And 𝐉𝐄 said, Arise, anoint him, for this is him. Then Shemu'al took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Ruach of 𝐉𝐄 came upon Dawid from that day forward. Furthermore, Shemu'al rose up and went to Ramah. Thus the Ruach of 𝐉𝐄 departed from Shaul, and an evil spirit from 𝐉𝐄 troubled him. Therefore the servants of Shaul said to him, Behold, an evil spirit from Elohim troubles you. Now let our Lord command your servants before you to seek out a man, a skilled player on a harp. And it will come to pass, when the evil spirit from Elohim is upon you, that he will play with his hand and you will be well." And Shaul said to his servants, "Now provide me a man who can play well, and bring him to me." Then one of the servants answered him and said, "Behold, I have seen a son of Yesse of 𝐤𝐄𝐄, skilled in playing, and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and understanding word, and a handsome person. Also Jehu is with him." Therefore Shaul sent messengers to Yesse, and said, "Send me Dawid your son, who is with the sheep." So Yesse took an ass with bread, and a bottle of wine, and a kid, and sent them with Dawid his son to Shaul. And Dawid came to Shaul and stood before him. Also he loved him greatly, and he became his armor-bearer. And Shaul sent to Yesse, saying, "Let Dawid, I pray you, stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight." And it came to pass, when the spirit of Elohim was upon Shaul, that Dawid took the harp and played with his hand. Therefore the spirit upon Shaul was good to him, and the evil spirit left from being upon him. Chapter 17. Now the Palestine gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Succoth, which belongs to Yehudah, and pitched between Succoth and Azekah, in Aibs Damin. Therefore Shaul and the men of Yeshareal were gathered together, and pitched by the valley of Allah, and set the battle in array against the Palestine. Moreover, the Palestine stood on one side of the mountain, and Yeshareal stood on the other side of the mountain, and there was a valley between them. And there a champion went out of the camp of the Palestine, named Gilead, of Gat, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a copper helmet upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of copper. Also he had copper greaves upon his legs, and a copper target between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead was 600 shekels of iron. Also someone carrying a shield went before him. Moreover, he stood and cried to the armies of Yeshareal, and said to them, "Why have you come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Pelishti, and you, servants belonging to Shaul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me, and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him, and kill him, then you will be our servants, and serve us." Then the Pelishti said, "Today I defy the armies of Yeshareal. Give me a man, so that we may fight together." When Shaul and all Yeshareal heard those words from the Pelishti, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now Dawid was the son of an Aparati of 𝐵𝐿echem of Yehudah, whose name was Yesse, and he had 8 sons. Moreover, the sons who were old enough during the days of Shaul went with the men. Therefore the 3 eldest of Yesse followed Shaul to the battle, and the names of the 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and the next to him Aminadab, and the third Shammah. Furthermore, Dawid was the youngest. However, the 3 eldest followed Shaul. Still yet Dawid went, but returned from Shaul to feed his father's sheep at 𝐵𝐿echem. And the Pelishti drew near morning and evening, and presented himself for 40 days. Furthermore, Yesse said to Dawid his son, "Now take for your brethren an ephah of this parched grain, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to your brethren. Also carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and look how your brothers fare, and take their pledge." Now Shaul and them and all the men of Yeshareal were in the valley of Allah, fighting with the Pelishtim. Therefore Dawid rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Yesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench, as the army was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Yeshareal and the Pelishtim had put the battle in array, army against army. So Dawid left his carriage in the hand of a carriage keeper, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked to them there, behold, the champion of the Pelishtim, whose name was Gilead of Gath, came up out of the armies of the Pelishtim, and spoke according to the same words. And David heard them. Moreover, all the men of Yashareal, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were very afraid. And the men of Yashareal said, Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Yashareal, and it will be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make the house of his father free in Yashareal. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, What will be done to the man who kills this Pelishti, and takes away the reproach from Yashareal? For who is this uncircumcised Pelishti, that he should defy the armies of the living Elohim? And the people answered him, saying, According to this manner it will be done to the man who kills him. And when he spoke to the men, Eliab, his eldest brother, heard, and the anger of Eliab was kindled against David, and he said, Why have you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride, and the naughtiness of your heart, for you have come down so that you might see the battle. But David said, What have I done now? There is no cause. Therefore he turned from him toward another, and spoke in the same way. And the people answered him again in the same way as before. And when the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Shaul, and he sent for him. Therefore David said to Shaul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Pelishti. However, Shaul said to David, You are not able to go against this Pelishti to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. Then David said to Shaul, Your servant keeps the sheep of his father. And there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went after him, and struck him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I caught his beard, and struck him, and slew him, the lion and the bear also. Therefore this uncircumcised Pelishti will be like one of them, seeing that he has defied the armies of the living Elohim. Then David said, Yahweh has delivered me out of the paw of the lion, and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Pelishti. Therefore Shaul said to David, Go, and may Yahweh be with you. Then Shaul armed David with his armor, and put a copper helmet upon his head, and he armed him with a coat of mail. Also David bound his sword to his armor. However, he hesitated to go, for he had not tested them. So David said to Shaul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. Therefore David took them off of himself. Next he took his staff in his hand, and chose himself 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in the shepherd's bag that he had, and his sling in his hand. And he drew near to the Pelishti. And the Pelishti came on and drew near to David. And the man who carried the shield was before him. And when the Pelishti looked around and saw David, he disdained him, for he was a youth, and a redhead, and fair to behold. Therefore the Pelishti said to David, Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? Then the Pelishti cursed David by his deities. And the Pelishti said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. So David said to the Pelishti, You come to me with a sword and a spear and a shield, but I come to you in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Yashareal, whom you have defied. Today Yahweh will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you, and I will take your head from you. And today I will give the carcasses of the army of the Pelishtim to the birds of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, so that the entire earth may know that there is an Elohim in Yashareal. Then everyone assembled will know that it was not by a sword or spear. Yahweh is the salvation, For to 𝐉𝐄 this battle has come, and 𝐉𝐄 has given you into our hands. And it came to pass when the Pelishti arose and came and drew near to Dawid, that Dawid hurried and ran towards the army to meet the Pelishti. Then Dawid put his hand in his bag, and took a stone from there, and slung it, and struck the Pelishti in his forehead. Thus the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So Dawid prevailed over the Pelishti with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Pelishti and slew him. And there was no sword in the hand of Dawid. Then Dawid ran and stood upon the Pelishti, and took his sword, and drew it out of its sheath, and slew him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Pelishtim saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Then the men of Yeshareal and of Yehudah arose, and shouted, and pursued the Pelishtim, until they came to the valley, and to the gates of Akron. And the wounded of the Pelishtim fell down by the way, to Shuarim, even to Gat, and to Akron. Then the children of Yeshareal returned from chasing after the Pelishtim, and they plundered their tents. Furthermore, Dawid took the head of the Pelishti, and brought it to Yerushalayim, and he put his armor in his tent. And when Shaul saw Dawid go forth against the Pelishti, he asked Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As your soul lives, O king, I cannot say. So the king said, Inquire whose son this young youth is. Then, as Dawid returned from the slaughter of the Pelishti, Abner took him and brought him to Shaul, with the head of the Pelishti in his hand. And Shaul said to him, Whose son are you, young man? Therefore Dawid answered, I am the son of your servant Yesse, of Beit Lechem. Chapter 18. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking to Shaul, that the soul of Jehonatan was knit with the soul of Dawid, and Jehonatan loved him like his own soul. Moreover, that day Shaul took him, and would not allow him to go home to his father's house any more. Then Jehonatan and Dawid made a covenant, because he loved him like his own soul. Furthermore, Jehonatan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to Dawid, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his bundle. And Dawid went wherever Shaul sent him, behaving himself wisely. And Shaul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people, also in the sight of Shaul's servants. And it happened, when Dawid returned from the slaughter of the Pelishtim, that the women came out of all the cities of Yeshareal, singing and dancing, to greet King Shaul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Shaul has killed thousands, and Dawid tens of thousands. Therefore Shaul was very wroth, and the song displeased him. And he said, They have accredited tens of thousands to Dawid, but to me they have accredited thousands. What more can he have except the kingdom? And from that day and forward Shaul eyed Dawid. And it came to pass on the next day that the evil spirit from Elohim came upon Shaul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house, and Dawid played with his hand, like at other times. However, there was a javelin in Shaul's hand, and Shaul cast the javelin, for he said, I will strike Dawid to the wall with this. But Dawid turned from before it twice. Therefore Shaul feared the presence of Dawid, because Yahweh was with him, and had departed from Shaul. So Shaul removed him from being around him, and made him a captain over 1,000. Furthermore, he went out and came in before the people, and Dawid behaved wisely in all his ways, and Yahweh was with him. Moreover, when Shaul saw that he behaved very wise, then he feared him even more. But all Yeshareal and Yehudah loved Dawid, because he went out and came in before them. So Shaul said to Dawid, Behold my eldest daughter Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me, and fight the battles of 𝐉𝐄𝐄. For Shaul said, Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Palestine be upon him. And David said to Shaul, Who am I, and what is my life, and my father's family in Yisrael, that I should be the son-in-law of a king? However, during the time when Merab, the daughter of Shaul, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel the Mecholati for a wife. Yet Michal, the daughter of Shaul, loved David, and they told Shaul, and this pleased him. Therefore Shaul said, I will give her to him, so that she may be a trap for him, and that the hand of the Palestine may be against him. Then Shaul said to David, Today you will become my son-in-law with the second. And Shaul commanded his servants, Commune with David secretly, and say, Behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. And Shaul's servants spoke those words in the ears of David. But David said, Does it seem to you a simple thing to be the king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor and simple man? And the servants of Shaul told him, saying, This is what David spoke. Therefore Shaul said, This you will say to David, The king does not desire a dowry, rather 100 foreskins from the Palestine, to be avenged of the king's enemies. And Shaul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Palestine. But when the servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not wasted. Therefore David arose and went, he and his men, and they slew 200 men from the Palestine. Then David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full to the king, so that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Shaul gave him Michal, his daughter, for a wife. Moreover, Shaul saw and knew that 𝐉𝐄𝐄 was with David, and Michal, the daughter of Shaul, loved him. However, Shaul became even more afraid of David, and Shaul was an enemy of David continually. Then the captains of the Palestine went forth, and it came to pass after they went forth that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Shaul, and his name was greatly respected. Chapter 19. And Shaul spoke to Jehonatan his son, and to his servants, that they should kill David. But Jehonatan, the son of Shaul, delighted in David greatly. So Jehonatan told David, saying, Shaul, my father, seeks to kill you. Now therefore, I pray you, take heed to yourself until the morning, and abide in secret, and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will commune with my father, and what I see, that I will tell you. Therefore Jehonatan spoke good of David to Shaul his father, and said to him, Do not let the king sin against his servant, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works towards you are very good. For he has put his life in his hand. Also 𝐉𝐄𝐄 has worked a great salvation for all Yisrael. You saw it, and rejoiced. Why then would you sin against innocent blood, to slay David without a cause? Therefore Shaul hearkened to the voice of Jehonatan, and Shaul swore, As 𝐉𝐄𝐄 lives, he will not be slain. Then Jehonatan called David, and Jehonatan showed him all these things. And Jehonatan brought David to Shaul, and he was in his presence like before. Furthermore, there was war again, and David went out, and fought with the Palestine, and slew them with a great slaughter, and they fled before him. Then the evil spirit from 𝐉𝐄𝐄 was upon Shaul, as he sat in his house with a javelin in his hand, and David played with his hand. And Shaul sought to strike David even to the wall with the javelin, but he slipped away out of Shaul's presence, and he struck the javelin into the wall. Moreover, David fled, and escaped that night. However, Shaul sent messengers to the house of David to watch him and to slay him in the morning. But Michal, the wife of David, told him, saying, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through the window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took a figure and laid it in the bed, and put a pillow of goat hair for a head, and covered it with a cloth. And when Shaul sent messengers to take David, she said, "He is sick." However, Shaul sent the messengers again to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me from bed, so I may slay him." And when the messengers had come in, behold, a figure was in the bed with a pillow of goat hair for his head. Therefore Shaul asked Michal, "Why have you deceived me like this, and sent my enemy away, so that he has escaped?" And Michal answered Shaul, "He said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I kill you?'" Therefore David fled and escaped, and came to Shemu'al at Ramah, and told him all that Shaul had done to him. So he and Shemu'al went and dwelt in 𝐤𝐄𝐄. And it was told to Shaul, saying, "Behold, David is in 𝐤𝐄𝐄 in Ramah." So Shaul sent messengers to take David. And when they saw the company of prophets prophesying, and Shemu'al appointed to stand over them, the Ruach of Elohim came upon the messengers of Shaul, and they prophesied also. And when this was told to Shaul, he sent other messengers, and they prophesied likewise. So Shaul sent messengers again, a third time, and they prophesied too. Lastly, he went to Ramah also, and he came to a great well that is in Sheku. And he asked and said, "Where is Shemu'al and David?" And it was said, "Behold, they are in 𝐤𝐄𝐄 in Ramah." Then he went there to 𝐤𝐄𝐄 in Ramah, and the Ruach of Elohim was upon him also. And he went on and prophesied, until he came to 𝐤𝐄𝐄 in Ramah. Then he also stripped off his clothes, and prophesied before Shemu'al in a similar manner. Then he lay down naked all that day and night. Therefore they ask, "Is Shaul among the prophets also?" Chapter 20. And David fled from 𝐤𝐄𝐄 to Ramah. Then he came before Jehunathan and said, "What have I done? What is my iniquity? And what is my sin before your father, such that he seeks my life?" Then he said to him, "Elohim forbid. You will not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, unless he shows it to me. So why would my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." But David swore and said, "Surely your father knows that I have found grace in your eyes." Therefore he says, "Do not let Jehunathan know this, or else he will be grieved. But truly as Yahweh lives, and as my soul lives, there is only one step between me and death." Then Jehunathan said to David, "Whatever your soul desires, I will do it for you." Therefore David said to Jehunathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon feast, and still I should sit with the king to eat. But let me go, so that I may hide myself in the field until the third evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David requested from me that he might run to his city, Bethlehem, for the annual sacrifice there with his entire family. If he says this, it is well, your servant will have peace. But if he is very angry, then be sure that evil was determined by him. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of Yahweh with you. Nevertheless, if there is iniquity in me, slay me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father?" However, Jehunathan said, "Be it far from you, for if I truly knew that my father has determined evil upon you, then would I not tell you?" Therefore David said to Jehunathan, "How will you tell me? Or what if your father answers you roughly?" Then Jehunathan said to David, "Come and let us go out into the field." So they both went out into the field. And Jehunathan said to David, I swear by 𝐉𝐄 Elohim of Yeshariel, once I have questioned my father on the third day, seeing there is goodness towards Dawid, will I not send for you then, and uncover your ears? May 𝐉𝐄 do so, and much more to 𝐉𝐄. But if it pleases my father to do evil, then I will show it to you, and send you away, so that you may go in peace. And may 𝐉𝐄 be with you, like he has been with your father. Also, you will not only show the kindness of 𝐉𝐄 to me while I'm still alive, so that I do not die, but you will not cut off your kindness from my house forever, nor when 𝐉𝐄 has cut off all the enemies of Dawid, each man from the face of the earth. Therefore 𝐉𝐄 was sided with the house of Dawid. Let 𝐉𝐄 even require it from the hand of the enemies of Dawid. And 𝐉𝐄 caused Dawid to swear again, because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then 𝐉𝐄 said to Dawid, "Tomorrow is the new moon feast, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. But when you have stayed 3 days, then go down and quickly come to the place where you hid yourself when your trouble began, and wait by the stone Elez. Then I will shoot 3 arrows on the side, as if I am shooting at a target. And behold, I will send a lad. Go find the arrows. If I say to the lad, 'Behold, the arrows are on this side of you, get them,' then you can come, for peace is unto you, and not harm, as 𝐉𝐄 lives. But if I say to the young man, 'Behold, the arrows are beyond you,' go your way, for 𝐉𝐄 has sent you away. And this matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, 𝐉𝐄 is between you and me forever." So Dawid hid himself in the field, and when the new moon had come, the king sat down to eat. Moreover, the king sat upon his seat beside the wall, like during other times. Also, 𝐉𝐄 was standing, and Abner sat beside Shaul. However, the place of Dawid was empty. But Shaul did not say anything that day, for he thought, "Something has befallen him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean." And it came to pass on the next day, the 2nd of the month, that the place of Dawid was empty. Therefore Shaul asked 𝐉𝐄 his son, "Why does the son of Yesse not come to eat? Not yesterday, nor today." So 𝐉𝐄 answered Shaul, "Dawid earnestly requested leave from me to go to Beit Lechem. And he said, 'Let me go, I pray you, for our family has a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. And now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away, I pray you, and see my brethren.' Therefore he has not come to the king's table." Then the anger of Shaul was kindled against 𝐉𝐄, and he said to him, "You are the son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Yesse to your own shame, and the shame of your exposed mother? For as long as the son of Yesse lives upon the Adamah, you will not be established, nor your kingdom. Therefore now send and fetch him for me, for he will surely die." But 𝐉𝐄 answered Shaul his father, and said to him, "Why should he be killed? What has he done?" Therefore Shaul cast a javelin at him to strike him. Then 𝐉𝐄 knew that it was determined by his father to slay Dawid. So 𝐉𝐄 arose from the table in fierce anger, and did not eat any food on the 2nd day of the month, because he grieved for Dawid, for his father had done him shame. And it came to pass in the morning that 𝐉𝐄 went out into the field at the appointed time with Dawid, and a little lad was with him. And he said to the lad, "Now run, find the arrows that I shoot." And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad had come to the place of the arrow, which 𝐉𝐄 had shot, 𝐉𝐄 cried after the lad and said, "Is the arrow not beyond you?" Then 𝐉𝐄 cried after the lad, "Make speed, hurry, do not delay." So the lad of 𝐉𝐄 gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the lad did not know anything, Only 𝐉𝐄𝐄 and Dawid understood the matter. Then 𝐉𝐄𝐄 gave his artillery to the lad, and said to him, "Go, carry them to the city." And as soon as the lad had gone, Dawid arose out of a place toward the south, and fell on his face to the ground, and bowed himself 3 times. And they kissed each other, and they wept together. But Dawid wept the most. Then 𝐉𝐄𝐄 told Dawid, "Go in peace, for both of us have sworn in the name of Yahweh, saying, Yahweh is between you and I, and between my seed and your seed forever." Therefore he arose and departed, and 𝐉𝐄𝐄 went into the city. Chapter 21. Then Dawid came to Nob, unto 𝐤𝐄𝐄 the priest. And 𝐤𝐤𝐄 was nervous at the meeting of Dawid, and asked him, "Why are you alone, and no man is with you?" Therefore Dawid said to 𝐤𝐤𝐄 the priest, "The king has commanded me to do a mission, and has said to me, Let no man know anything about the mission that I send you to do, or what I have commanded you. Also I have appointed my servants to such and such place. Now therefore, what is in your hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or whatever you have to give." Then the priest answered Dawid and said, "There is no common bread in my hand, but if the men have kept themselves from women, there is Kodesh bread." Moreover, Dawid responded to the priest and said to him, "Of a truth, women have been kept from us about 3 days, since I came out. And the vessels of the young men are Kodesh, in a common way, although today the vessel is Kodesh." So the priest gave him the Kodesh bread, for there was no bread except the showbread, which was taken from before Yahweh, to put fresh bread in the day that it was taken away. Now a certain man from the servants of Shaul was there that day, detained before Yahweh, and his name was Doeg, an Adumi. He was the best of the herdmen who belonged to Shaul. Furthermore, Dawid said to 𝐤𝐤𝐄, "And is there not a spear or sword here in your hand? For I have not brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's mission required haste." Therefore the priest said, "The sword of Gilat the Pelishti, who you killed in the valley of Allah, behold, it is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, because there is no other except it here." Therefore Dawid said, "There is no other like it. Give it to me." Then Dawid arose, and he fled that day for fear of Shaul, and he went to Achish, the king of Gath. Moreover, the servants of Achish said of him, "Is this not Dawid, the king from the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Shaul has killed thousands, and Dawid tens of thousands?" Therefore Dawid laid these words up in his heart, and was very afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. And he changed his behavior before them, and behaved like a madman in their hands, and scratched at the doors of the gate, and allowed spit to fall down upon his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, "Look, do you see the man is insane? Why have you brought him to me? Do I have need of a madman, so that you have brought this lunatic to parade in my presence? Should this come into my house?" Chapter 22. And Dawid departed from there, and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Moreover, when his brethren and the entire house of his father heard of it, they went down there to him. Furthermore, everyone who was distressed, and everyone who was deceived, and everyone who was discontent gathered themselves to him, and he became a captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. Then Dawid went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and said to the king of Moab, "I pray you, let my father and mother come to you, until I know what Elohim will do for me." And he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him the entire time that Dawid was in the hold. And the prophet of God said to Dawid, "Do not live in a trap. Depart and get yourself into the land of Yehudah." Then Dawid departed, and came to the forest of Harat. Now Shaul abode in Gibeot, under the tree of Ramah, having a spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing around him. When Shaul heard that Dawid was discovered, and the men who were with him, then Shaul said to his servants who stood around him, "Hear now, you Binyamini. Will the son of Yesse give each of you fields and vineyards, making you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? For all of you have conspired against me, and no one has shown me that my son has made a league with the son of Yesse. And none of you are sorry for me, or shows to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me, to lie in wait, like this day." Then Doeg the Edomi, who was set over the servants of Shaul, responded and said, "I saw the son of Yesse come to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahithub, and he inquired of Jehovah for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Pelishti. Therefore the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahithub, and the entire house of his father, the priests who were in Nub, and they all came to the king. And Shaul said, "Hear now, you son of Ahithub." And he answered, "Here I am, my lord." Then Shaul asked him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Yesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of Elohim for him, so that he will rise against me to lie in wait like this day?" Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, "And who is as faithful among all your servants as Dawid, who is the king's son-in-law, and goes at your bidding, and is honorable in your house? Did I begin to inquire of Elohim for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servant, nor to the entire house of my father, for your servant knows nothing of all this, less or more." However, the king said, "Surely you will die, Ahimelech, you and the entire house of your father." Then the king said to the footmen who stood around him, "Turn and slay the priests of Jehovah, because their hand is with Dawid also, and because they knew when he fled, and did not reveal it to me." But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of Jehovah. Therefore the king said to Doeg, "Turn and fall upon the priests." So Doeg the Edomi turned and fell upon the priests. And on that day he killed 85 people who wore a linen ephod. Furthermore, he struck Nob, the city of the priests, with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep, with the edge of the sword. However, one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahithub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after Dawid. Moreover, Abiathar showed Dawid that Saul had slain the priests of Jehovah. Therefore Dawid said to Abiathar, "I knew it that day when Doeg the Edomi was there, that he would surely tell Shaul. I have caused this to all the people of the house of your father. Do not be afraid, abide with me, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. But with me you are protected." Chapter 23. Then they told Dawid, saying, "Behold, the Philistine fought against Keilah, and they robbed the threshing floors." Therefore Dawid inquired of Jehovah, saying, "Should I go and attack the Philistine?" And Jehovah said to Dawid, "Go and attack the Philistine, and save Keilah." However, the men of Dawid said to him, "Behold, we are afraid here in the Yehudah. How much more if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistine?" Therefore Dawid inquired of Jehovah again. And Jehovah answered him and said, "Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistine into your hand." So Dawid and his men went to Keilah, and fought with the Philistine, and brought away their livestock, and struck them with a great slaughter. Thus Dawid saved the inhabitants of Keilah. And because Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to Dawid, he had access to an ephod when he went to Keilah. And it was told to Shaul that Dawid had gone to Keilah. And Shaul said, "Elohim has exposed him. He is in my hand. for by entering into the town that has gates and bars, he is shut in. Then Shaul called all the people together for war, to go down to Keilah, to besiege David and his men. However, David knew that Shaul secretly practiced mischief against him. Therefore he said to Abiathar, the priest, "Bring the ephod here." Then David said, "O 𝐉𝐄𝐄 Elohim of Yisrael, truly your servant has heard that Shaul intends to come to Keilah, to destroy the city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me into his hand? Will Shaul come down, as your servant has heard? O 𝐉𝐄 Elohim of Yisrael, I beseech you, tell your servant." Therefore 𝐉𝐄 said, "He will come down. Will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Shaul?" And 𝐉𝐄 answered, "They will deliver you up." Then David and his men, who were about 600, rose up and departed out of Keilah, and they went wherever they could go. And it was told to Shaul that David had escaped from Keilah, so he refrained from going. Furthermore, David abode in the wilderness in strongholds, and remained in a mountain in the wilderness of Ziph. And Shaul sought him every day, but Elohim did not deliver him into his hand. And David saw that Shaul had come to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in the woods. Also Jehonatan the son of Shaul arose, and went to David into the woods, and strengthened his hand in Elohim. And he said to him, "Do not fear, for the hand of Shaul my father will not find you, and you will become king over Yisrael, and I will be next to you. Also Shaul my father knows this." And they both made a covenant before 𝐉𝐄. Then David stayed in the woods, but Jehonatan went to his house. Then the Ziphim came to Shaul at Gibeot, saying, "Does David not hide himself with us in the strongholds in the woods, in the hill of Hachilah, which is on the south of Yeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of your soul, and our role will be to deliver him into the king's hand." Therefore Shaul said, "Blessed are you of 𝐉𝐄, for you have compassion on me. Go, I pray you, still prepare and learn, and see the place where he hides. Who has seen him there? For I have been told that he is very tricky. Therefore watch and discover all the secret places where he hides himself. Then return to me with certainty, and I will go with you. And it will come to pass, if he is in the land, that I will search him out throughout all the thousands of Yehudah." So they arose from before Shaul and went to Ziph. However, David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the plain on the south of Yeshimon. Furthermore, Shaul and his men went to seek, and it was told to David. Therefore he went down into a rock and abode in the wilderness of Maon. And when Shaul heard that, he pursued after David in the wilderness of Maon. Moreover, Shaul was on this side of the mountain, and David was on that side of the mountain. So David made haste to get away for fear of Shaul, because Shaul and his men encompassed David, and his men were all around to take them. But a messenger came to Shaul, saying, "Hurry and come, for the Palestine have invaded the land." This is the reason why Shaul returned from pursuing after David, and went against the Palestine. Therefore they call that place the Rock of Escape. Then David went up from there, and dwelt in strongholds at Ein Gedi. Chapter 24. And it came to pass, when Shaul returned from following the Palestine, that it was told to him, saying, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of Ein Gedi." Then Shaul took 3,000 chosen men out of Yisrael, and went to seek David and his men up in the rocks of the wild goats. And he came to the sheep cots along the way, where there was a cave. So Shaul went in to cover his feet. Moreover, David and his men remained in the sides within the cave. So the men of David said to him, "Look, it's the day that 𝐉𝐄 said to you, Behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, so that you may do to him as it seems good to you. Therefore Dawid rose up and secretly cut off the skirt of the robe of Shaul. But afterward the heart of Dawid struck him, because he had cut off the skirt of Shaul. And he said to his men, Yahweh forbid that I do this thing to my master, the Mashiach of Yahweh, to stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of Yahweh. So Dawid withheld his servants with these words, and did not allow them to raise up against Shaul. Then Shaul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. Also Dawid rose up and followed. Then he went out of the cave and cried after Shaul, saying, My lord, the king. And when Shaul looked behind him, Dawid stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. Then Dawid asked Shaul, Why do you listen to the words of Adam, saying, Behold, Dawid seeks you harm. Behold, today your eyes can see that Yahweh has delivered you into my hand in the cave. And some told me to kill you, but I spared you. And I said, I will not put my hand against my Lord, for he is the Mashiach of Yahweh. Also my father sees. Now behold the skirt of your robe in my hand. For I cut off the skirt of your robe in here, but I did not kill you. Know and understand that there was never evil nor transgression in my hand, and I have not sinned against you. Yet you hunt my life to take it. May Yahweh judge between you and I, and Yahweh avenge me of you. But my hand will not be upon you, like it says in the ancient proverb, wickedness proceeds from the wicked. However, my hand will not be upon you, of whom the king of Yisrael came out, of whom you pursued, a dead dog chasing a flea. Therefore Yahweh is the judge, and he will judge between you and I, and he sees, and he pleads my case, and he has delivered me out of your hand. And it came to pass when Dawid was finished speaking these words to Shaul, that Shaul said, Is this your voice, Dawid, my son? Therefore Shaul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to Dawid, You are more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded you evil. And today you have shown how you have dealt well with me. When Yahweh had delivered me into your hand, you did not kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, does he let him go away unharmed? Therefore may Yahweh reward you for the goodness that you have done for me today. Now behold, surely I know that you will become king, and that the kingdom of Yisrael will be established in your hand. Therefore swear to me now before Yahweh that you will not cut off my seed after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. Therefore Dawid swore to Shaul, and Shaul went home, but Dawid and his men went up to the hold. Chapter 25. And Shemu'al died, and all Yisrael were gathered together, and lamented him, and buried him in his house at Ramah. And Dawid arose, and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And there is a man in Maon, whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail, and she was a woman with good understanding, and with a beautiful shape. But the man was harsh and wicked in his doings, and he was from the house of Caleb. And Dawid heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So Dawid sent 10 young men, and Dawid said to the young men, Go up to Carmel, and go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And you will say this to the living, Shalom, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I have heard that you have shearers. Now your shepherds who were with me, we did not hurt them, nor was there any missing of them. the whole time we were in 𝐤𝐄𝐄. Ask your young men, and they will show you. Therefore let the young men find favor in your eyes, for we come in a good day. Whatever comes to your hand, give of it to your servants, and to your son Dawid. And when the young men of Dawid came, they spoke to Nabal according to all those words in the name of Dawid, and stopped. And Nabal answered the servants of Dawid, and said, Who is Dawid? And who is the son of Yesse? There are many servants now these days, each man breaking away from his master. So should I take my bread, and my water, and my flesh, which I have killed for my shearers, and give it to men whom I do not know where they came from? Therefore the young men of Dawid turned their way, and went again, and came and told him all these words. So Dawid said to his men, Every man bind your sword. Therefore each man bound his sword. Also Dawid bound his sword. And about 400 men went up following Dawid, but 200 stayed by the equipment. Furthermore, one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, Behold, Dawid sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he scolded them. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor missed anything as long as we were conversant with them. When we were in the fields, they were a wall for us, both day and night, the whole time that we kept the sheep with them. Now therefore know and consider what you should do, for evil is determined against our master, and against his household, for he is a son of worthlessness, because a man cannot speak to him. Therefore Abigail made haste, and took 200 loaves, and 2 bottles of wine, and 5 sheep ready prepared, and 5 measures of parched grain, and 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them upon asses. Then she said to her servants, Go on before me. Behold, I will follow after you. However, she did not tell her husband Nabal. Furthermore, as she rode on the ass, she came down hidden by the hills. Behold, Dawid and his men came down towards her, and she met them. Now Dawid said, Surely in vain I have kept all that this fellow has in the wilderness, such that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him, and he has repaid me evil for good. Now the same Elohim will do to all the enemies of Dawid, and more so, if I leave anything of all belonging to him by the morning light among those who piss on the wall. And when Abigail saw Dawid, she hurried and got off the ass, and fell before Dawid on her face, and bowed herself to the ground. Also she fell at his feet, and said, Upon me, my lord, the iniquity is mine. And let your handmaid, I pray you, speak in your audience, and hear the words of your handmaid. I pray you, do not let my lord regard this man of worthlessness, Nabal, for like his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and foolishness is within him. But I, your handmaid, did not see the young men of my lord, whom you sent. Now therefore, my lord, as 𝐤𝐄𝐄 lives, and as your soul lives, seeing that 𝐤𝐄𝐄 has withheld you from coming to shed blood, and from avenging yourself by your own hand, now let your enemies and those who seek evil to my lord be like Nabal. Now this blessing which your handmaid has brought to my lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my lord. I pray you, forgive the trespass of your handmaid, for surely 𝐤𝐄𝐄 will make my lord a sure house, because my lord fights the battles of 𝐤𝐄𝐄, and evil has not been found in you all your days. Even though Adam rose up to pursue you, and to seek your soul, but the soul of my lord will be bound in the bundle of life with 𝐤𝐄𝐄, your Elohim, and the souls of your enemies, them he will sling out of the middle of the sling. And it will come to pass when 𝐤𝐄𝐄 has done for my lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you a ruler over Yisrael, that this will not be a grief for you, nor an offense for the heart of my Lord, either that you have shed blood for no reason, or that my Lord has avenged himself. Also, when 𝐉𝐄 has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your handmaid. Therefore David said to Abigail, Endowed is 𝐉𝐄 Elohim of Yisrael, who sent you to me today, and endowed is your advice, and endowed is you, who has kept me from coming to shed blood and from avenging myself by my own hand today. For truly, as 𝐉𝐄 Elohim of Yisrael lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, except you had hurried and come to meet me, surely there would not be anyone left of Nabal by the morning light among those who piss on the wall. Moreover, David received from her hand that which she had brought him, and said to her, Go up to your house in peace. Behold, I have hearkened to your voice, and have lifted your face. Then Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king, and the heart of Nabal was merry within him, for he was very drunk. Therefore she did not tell him anything, more or less, until the morning light. And it came to pass during the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became like a stone. Then it was about 10 days later that 𝐉𝐄 struck Nabal, and he died. Furthermore, when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Endowed is 𝐉𝐄, who has pleaded the case of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and has kept his servant from evil. For 𝐉𝐄 has returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. Then David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to himself for a wife. And when the servants of David came to Abigail at Carmel, they spoke to her, saying, David sent us to you, to take you to himself for a wife. And she arose and bowed her face to the earth. Then she said, Behold, your handmaid is a servant, to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. And Abigail hasted and arose, and rode upon an ass, with 5 of her damsels who followed her. And she followed the messengers of David, and became his wife. Also David took Ahinoam of Azrael, and so both of them were his wives. Furthermore, Shaul had given Michal, his daughter, the wife of David, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was of Galim. Chapter 26. And the Zippim came to Shaul at Gibeat, saying, Does David not hide himself in the hill of Hachilah before Yeshimon? Therefore Shaul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Yisrael with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Shaul pitched in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Yeshimon by the way. Moreover, David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Shaul came after him into the wilderness. Therefore David sent out spies, and knew that the approach of Shaul was true. And David saw the place where Shaul laid, also Abner the son of Ner, the captain of his army. Furthermore, Shaul laid in the trench, and the people pitched around him. Then David addressed Ahimelech the Hittite, and Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to the camp of Shaul? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. Therefore David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Shaul laid asleep within the trench, and his spear was stuck in the ground by his head. Also Abner and the people laid around him. Then Abishai said to David, Today Elohim has delivered your enemy into your hand. Now I pray you, let me strike him with the spear to the earth once, but I will not do it to him a second time. However, David said to Abishai, Do not destroy him, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Mashiach of 𝐉𝐄 and be guiltless? Therefore David said, As 𝐉𝐄 lives, 𝐉𝐄 will strike him. or his day to die will come, or he will go down into battle and perish. 𝐉𝐄 forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the anointed of 𝐉𝐄. Now, I pray you, let's take the spear that is by his head, and the jug of water. Then let's go. So Dawid took the spear and the jug of water by the head of Shemu'al. Although they went to them, still no man saw it, nor knew it, nor awakened, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from 𝐉𝐄 had fallen upon them. Then Dawid went to the other side and stood far away, on top of a hill with a great distance between them. Then Dawid cried to the people, and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, Why don't you answer? Therefore Abner answered and said, Who are you that cries to the king? So Dawid said to Abner, Aren't you a man? And who is compared to you in Yisrael? Why then have you not protected your lord, the king? For one of the people came in there to destroy the king, your lord. This thing is not good that you have done. As 𝐉𝐄 lives, you are worthy of death, for you have not protected your master, the Mashiach of 𝐉𝐄. And now look for the king's spear and the jug of water that was by his head. Then Shaul recognized the voice of Dawid and asked, Is this the voice of Dawid, my son? Therefore Dawid answered, It is my voice, my lord, O king. Then he asked, Why does my lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in my hand? Now I pray you, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If 𝐉𝐄 has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if it is the children of Adam, they are cursed before 𝐉𝐄, for they have driven me out today from abiding in the inheritance of 𝐉𝐄, saying, Go serve other deities. Now therefore do not let my blood fall on the earth before the face of 𝐉𝐄, just because the king of Yisrael has come looking for a flea, like when someone hunts one partridge in the mountains. Then Shaul said, I have sinned. Return, Dawid, my son, for I will not harm you any more, because my soul was precious in your eyes today. Behold, I have played the fool, and have erred exceedingly. Then Dawid answered and said, Behold, the king's spear. Now let one of your young men come over and fetch it. 𝐉𝐄 renders to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness, and 𝐉𝐄 delivered you into my hand today. But I would not stretch forth my hand against the anointed of 𝐉𝐄. And behold, like your life has great value in my eyes today, so too my life has great value in the eyes of 𝐉𝐄. And may he deliver me out of all tribulation. Then Shaul said to Dawid, Blessed are you, Dawid, my son. You will do great things, and also prevail. Therefore Dawid went on his way, and Shaul returned to his place. Chapter 27. And Dawid said in his heart, Now I will perish one day by the hand of Shaul. There is nothing better for me to do than that I quickly escape to the land of the Palestine. Then Shaul will become weary from seeking me throughout all the borders of Yisrael, and I will escape out of his hand. Therefore Dawid rose up, and he passed over with the 600 men who were with him to Achish, the son of Mauk, king of Gat. Furthermore, Dawid dwelt with Achish at Gat, he and his men, every man with his household, Dawid with his 2 wives, 𝐤𝐄, the woman from Yisrael, and Abigail, the woman from Carmel, the wife of Nabal. And it was told to Shaul that Dawid fled to Gat. Therefore he did not seek him again any more. And Dawid said to Achish, Now if I have found favor in your eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, so that I may dwell there. For why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you? Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day. Therefore Ziklag pertains to the kings of Yehudah to this day. And the time that Dawid dwelt in the country of the Palestine was a full year and 4 months. Furthermore, Dawid and his men went up and invaded the Geshuri and the Gizri and the Amaleki, for these were the old inhabitants of the land, as you go to Shur, even to the land of the Mitzrayim. Moreover, Dawid struck the land, and did not leave a man nor woman alive. Also he took away the sheep, and the oxen, and the asses, and the camels, and the apparel. Then he returned and came to Achish. So Achish asked, "What path have you made today? Against the south of Yehuda, and against the south of 𝐤𝐄𝐄, and against the south of the Keni." However, Dawid did not save a man nor woman alive to bring to Gat the entire time he dwelt in the country of the Philistine, saying, "Lest they tell on us, saying, Dawid did this, and this is his manner." Furthermore, Achish believed Dawid, saying, "He has made his people Yeshareal to completely despise him. Therefore he will be my servant forever." Chapter 28. And it came to pass during those days that the Philistine gathered their armies together for war, to fight Yeshareal. And Achish said to Dawid, "Surely you know that you and your men will go out with me to battle." And Dawid said to Achish, "Surely you know what your servant can do." Then Achish said to Dawid, "Therefore I will make you the head of my guards forever." Now Shemu'al was dead, and all Yeshareal mourned for him, and buried him in Ramah, in his own city. Also Shaul removed those who had familiar spirits and wizards from the land. Furthermore, the Philistine gathered themselves together. Then they came and pitched in Shumain. And Shaul gathered all Yeshareal together, and they pitched at Gilbaah. And when Shaul saw the encampment of the Philistine, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Shaul inquired of 𝐤𝐄𝐄, 𝐤𝐄𝐄 did not answer him, not by dreams, not by Urim, not by prophets. Then Shaul said to his servants, "Find a woman, a mistress, medium, so that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servants said to him, "Behold, there is a woman, a mistress, medium, at Ein Dar." Therefore Shaul disguised himself and put on other clothes. Then he went. Also 2 men went with him, and they came to the woman by night, and said, "I pray you, enchant unto me by a familiar spirit, and bring up whom I will name to you." However, she said to him, "Behold, you know what Shaul has done, how he has removed those who have familiar spirits and wizards from the land. Why then have you laid a trap for my life, to cause me to die?" Therefore Shaul swore to her by 𝐤𝐄𝐄, saying, "As 𝐤𝐄𝐄 lives, no punishment will happen to you for this thing." Then the woman asked, "Who should I bring up for you?" And he answered, "Bring up Shemu'al for me." And when the woman saw Shemu'al, she cried with a loud voice. Then the woman spoke to Shaul, saying, "Why have you deceived me? For you are Shaul." Then the king said to her, "Do not be afraid because of what you saw." So the woman said to Shaul, "I saw deities ascending out of the earth." Then he asked her, "What form is he?" And she answered, "An old man comes up, and he is covered with a mantle." And Shaul understood that it was Shemu'al, and he stooped with his face to the ground, and bowed before him. Then Shemu'al said to Shaul, "Why have you disturbed me, to bring me up?" Therefore Shaul answered, "I am very distressed, for the Philistine have made war against me, and Elohim has departed from me, and does not answer me any more, not by prophets, not by dreams. So I have called you, so that you will tell me what I should do." Then Shemu'al said, "Why then do you ask of me, seeing 𝐤𝐄𝐄 has departed from you, and has become your enemy? And 𝐤𝐄𝐄 has done for himself what he spoke by me, for 𝐤𝐄𝐄 has torn the kingdom out of your hand, and given it to your neighbor, to Dawid, because you did not obey the voice of 𝐤𝐄𝐄, nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore 𝐉𝐄 has done this thing to you today. Also 𝐉𝐄 will deliver Yeshariel with you into the hand of the Philistine, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. Also 𝐉𝐄 will deliver the encampment of Yeshariel into the hand of the Philistine. Then Shaul immediately fell his full length upon the earth, and was very afraid, because of the words of Shemu'al. And there was no strength in him, for he had not eaten any bread all that day and all that night. Moreover, the woman came to Shaul, and she saw that he was very troubled. Then she said to him, Behold, your handmaid has obeyed your voice, and I have put my life in your hand, and have hearkened to the words you spoke to me. Now I pray you, hearken to the voice of your handmaid also, and let me set a morsel of bread before you, and eat, so that you may have strength when you go on your way. But he refused, and said, I will not eat. However, his servants together with the woman compelled him. So he hearkened to their voice. Then he rose up from the earth, and sat upon the bed. And the woman had a fat calf in the house. Then she hurried and killed it. Also she took flour and kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread with it. Moreover, she brought it before Shaul and before his servants, and they ate. Then they rose up and went away that night. Chapter 29. Now the Philistine gathered together all their armies to Aphek, and the Yesharieli pitched by a fountain which is in Yezreel. And the lords of the Philistine passed on by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men passed on in the rear with Achish. Then the captains of the Philistine said, Why are these Aibrim here? Therefore Achish said to the captains of the Philistine, Is this not David, the servant of Shaul the king of Yeshariel, who has been with me these days and these years? Also I have found no fault in him since he came down to this day. However, the captains of the Philistine were angry with him. Therefore the captains of the Philistine said to him, Make this fellow return, so that he may go back to his place, which you have appointed him. But do not let him go down to the battle with us, lest during the battle he becomes an adversary to us. With what might he reconcile to his master, if not with the heads of these men? Is this not David, of whom they sang one to another in dances, saying, Shaul killed thousands, and David killed tens of thousands? Then Achish called David and said to him, Surely as 𝐉𝐄 lives, you have been upright. Also your departure and return with me in the army is good in my sight. For I have not found evil in you since the day of your coming to me unto this day. However, the lords do not favor you. Therefore, now return and go in peace, so that you do not displease the lords of the Philistine. However, David said to Achish, But what have I done? And what have you found in your servant for as long as I have been with you to this day, so that I may not go fight against the enemies of my lord the king? Then Achish answered and said to David, I know that you are good in my sight, like an angel of Elohim. Nevertheless, the captains of the Philistine have said, He will not go up with us to the battle. Therefore, rise up early in the morning with your master's servants, who have come with you. Then, as soon as you are up early in the morning and have light, depart. So David and his men rose up early to depart in the morning, to return to the land of the Philistine. But the Philistine went up to Yezreel. Chapter 30. And it came to pass when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalek invaded the south and Ziklag. Also Ziklag was beaten and burned with fire. And they took the women who were in it captives. They did not kill any, neither great nor small, but carried them away. Then they went on their way. Furthermore, David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire. Also their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. Then Dawid and the people who were with him lifted up their voice and wept, until they had no more power to weep. Also the 2 wives of Dawid were taken captive, 𝐤𐄄𐤅𐄄, the woman from Yezreel, and Abigail, the woman from Carmel, the wife of Nabal. And Dawid was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and daughters. But Dawid encouraged himself in 𝐤𝐄𝐄 his Elohim. Moreover, Dawid said to Abiathar the priest, the son of 𝐤𝐄𝐿, I pray you, bring the ephod here to me. Therefore Abiathar brought the ephod there to Dawid. Therefore Dawid inquired of 𝐤𝐄𝐄, saying, Should I pursue after this troop? Will I overtake them? And he answered them, Pursue, for you will surely overtake them, and you will deliver the plunder. So Dawid went, he and the 600 men who were with him, and came to the brook Beshur, where those who were left behind stayed. But Dawid pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 stayed behind, who were so faint that they could not go over the brook Beshur. Furthermore, they found a Mitzri in the field, and brought him to Dawid, and gave him bread, and he ate. Also they made him drink water, and they gave him a piece of cake of figs, and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came back to him again, for he had not eaten any bread, nor drank any water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then Dawid asked him, To whom do you belong, and where are you going? And he answered, I am a young man of Mitzrayim, servant to an Amaleki, and my master left me, because I fell sick 3 days ago. We made an invasion upon the south of the Kereti, and upon Yehuda, and upon the south of Geleb. Also we burned Ziklag with fire. Then Dawid asked him, Can you bring me down to this company? Therefore he answered, Swear to me by Elohim that you will not kill me, nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring you down to this company. And when he had brought them down, behold, they were scattered upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great plunder that they had taken out from the land of the Pelishtim, and out from the land of Yehuda. Then Dawid struck them from twilight until the evening of the next day, and no man from them escaped, except 400 young men, who rode upon camels and fled. Therefore Dawid recovered all that the Amalek had carried away. Also Dawid recovered his 2 wives. And there was nothing lacking of them, nor small nor great, nor sons nor daughters, nor plunder, nor anything that they had taken to themselves. Dawid recovered everything. Furthermore, Dawid took all the previous flocks and herds that they drove before this other livestock, and said, This is Dawid's plunder. Moreover, Dawid came to the 200 men, who were so faint that they could not follow Dawid, whom they also made to stay at the brook Besher. And they went to meet Dawid, and to meet the people who were with him. And when Dawid came near to the people, he saluted them. However, all the wicked and worthless men among those who went with Dawid responded and said, Because they did not go with us, we will not give them from the plunder that we have recovered, except to each man his wife and children, that they may lead away and depart. But Dawid said, You will not do so, my brethren, with that which 𝐤𝐄𝐄 has given us, who has preserved us and delivered the company that came against us into our hand. For who will hearken to you in this matter? But like the portion of those who go to battle, so too will be the portion of those who stay with the equipment. They will be divided equally. And it was so from that day forward, for he made it a statute and an ordinance in Yeshareal to this day. And when Dawid came to Ziklag, he sent from the plunder to the elders of Yehuda, to his friends, saying, Behold a present for you of the plunder of the enemies of 𝐉𝐄. And to those who were in Beit Al, and to those who were in southern Ramut, and to those who were in Yeter, and to those who were in Aruar, and to those who were in Chipmut, and to those who were in Ashdema'ah, and to those who were in Rakal, and to those who were in the cities of the Yerakamali, and to those who were in the cities of the Kini, and to those who were in Harma, and to those who were in Ashan, and to those who are in Atak, and to those who were in Hebron, and to all the places where David and his men were known to roam. Chapter 31. Now the Pelishtim fought against Yeshareal, and the men of Yeshareal fled before the Pelishtim, and fell down slain in Mount Gilbeah. Furthermore, the Pelishtim followed hard upon Shaul and upon his sons, and the Pelishtim slew Jehunathan, and Animadab, and Melchishua, the sons of Shaul. And the battle was fierce against Shaul, and the archers hit him, and he was badly wounded by the archers. Then Shaul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw my sword and thrust it through me, or else these uncircumcised will come and thrust through me, and abuse me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was very afraid. Therefore Shaul took a sword and fell upon it. And when the armor-bearer saw that Shaul was dead, he fell upon his sword likewise, and died with him. So Shaul, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men died together that same day. And when the men of Yeshareal, who were on the other side of the valley, and who were on the other side of Yarden, saw that the men of Yeshareal fled, and that Shaul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled. And the Pelishtim came and dwelt in them. And it came to pass on the next day, when the Pelishtim came to strip the slain, that they found Shaul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilbeah. Therefore they cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and sent it into the land of the Pelishtim round about, to publish it in the house of their idols, and among the people. Also they put his armor in the house of Ashtarut, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bashan. And when the inhabitants of Yabesh of Gilead heard of that which the Pelishtim had done to Shaul, all the valiant men arose, and went all night, and took the body of Shaul, and the bodies of his sons, from the wall of Bashan. Then they came to Yabesh, and burnt them there. Then they took their bones, and buried them under a tree at Yabesh, and fasted for 7 days.